Thank you so much for joining us for Suburban Homesteading. This is our second in this new series that we are doing this year. For anyone that was not able to join us last month for our Basics of Suburban Gardening, you can go back onto our YouTube and rewatch that in the future if you would like to. And I just want to introduce Jillae as we're getting going. She's the owner and founder of Wanderin Barefoot Farm, which is a small, organically practiced farm in Campton Hills, founded in 2016. Jillae focuses on educating the community on how to be self-sufficient, grow their own food, and bring that food to the table and the pantry. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm going to turn it over to Jillae.
All right. Hello. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Sorry, we're having some issues with the PowerPoint, and now I don't know how to do this. But good thing here is that we don't really need the PowerPoint, so it's fine. We will post it up elsewhere so you guys can see it if you'd like. But welcome to our second class. Today we're going to cover seed starting and also planting and maintaining after you start your seeds. So to get started, we're going to talk a little bit about the outline of the series. So this is the last class that we're having this spring. These will pick up again in the fall. I don't know if you guys can see this. I'm like, maybe we can just, So today is the seed starting. In September, we're going to talk about fall gardening. In September, you can actually plant an entire other garden and get a whole nother harvest before the winter comes. So it's kind of a nice change. When you think the season's over, you can actually keep going a little bit. And then in October, we'll talk about preserving. I do a lot of canning and pickling and drying and all of that, so we'll go over that in October. And then in November, we're going to talk about raising chickens. Does anyone know here in the Wheaton area if you're allowed to have chickens? Just wondering if anyone knew that. No? Okay, well, I'll find that out for you. And like Jackie said, my name is Jillae. I am the owner and founder of Wanderin Barefoot Farms. We are in Campton Hills, so west of St. Charles, and it's my husband and I. My husband, Wes, has lived on homesteads his whole life. My father-in-law has a 10-acre homestead. Right now he has 63 beehives on accident, which is another story. Started with 3 and got 60 more somehow. And he's got ducks and animals and all that good stuff. So my husband kind of grew up around this stuff. He knows a lot more than I do. He taught me everything I know, really. And then we have 2 boys. Wyatt is going to be 3 next month, and Archer is 6 months. So that is our farm crew. The boys aren't very helpful at this point. All right, so we're on seed starting today. And the first thing to go over, which we went over on our last class if you were here, is the zone that we're in. So the zone is the most important part of knowing everything about your garden, because it's what can live in your garden at this area that we live in. So we are in Zone 5B, and actually when you get to Cook County, there's Zone 6. So if you live in Cook County, you're Zone 6. It's kind of weird how that happens, but changes just slightly with a different season. I think it's by 10 degrees is the difference there. But it does make an impact on what you plant and when. So Zone 5B is where we're at, and it's just important to remember that, because starting your seeds, you're going to follow a timeline based on that zone. So if you lived in 6, the timeline's going to shift just slightly. So keep that in mind as well as we're talking. And if you are not in this area on Zoom, you need to figure out where your zone is, and then you can figure out your planting schedule from there. So for starting your seeds, I kind of brought a bunch of stuff here. The first part of starting your seeds is gathering all the material that you want to use. So to start, you grab your seed trays. You can do huge ones like this. This is a 72 cell. These are good for smaller plants, or if you do plant your big plants in here, you will have to transplant them into bigger pots like this. You can get these little greenhouse starters from any local store, Home Depot, or any local farm store that are really nice. They come with the pellets inside as well, that you can use for soil. Kind of an all-in-one feature here. On our farm, we use these mostly, and then we also use things like solo cups, nothing fancy. We drill holes in the bottom. Solo cups, we use these little cups that you can just plant right in the peats. Thank you. Couldn't find the word. Peat cups that you can plant right into the ground if you want to. I tend to not plant these in the ground. I don't know why. I just don't. I just pull them out like I do the rest of the transplants. And then we also use these that are just a little bit bigger. I plant my bigger seeds in these guys. You'll also want to get a seed starting mix. The one I'm showing you guys today is pretty basic. It has really good ingredients in it. The peat moss, which is just decomposed organic matter. You have coconut coir, which is actually the shell of the coconut. The husk of the coconut is what coconut coir is. And vermiculite, which is just a dehydrated, different minerals. It's like sulfate, and I have it written down for you guys. I actually have a whole slide, but we're off on the slides. Let me see. So vermiculite is minerals containing magnesium, iron, and aluminum in silicate. And what happens is they dry out and they pop and they flake into this little flake, and they help retain the water. So this is a really great mix because it's very light. It has a decent nutrient balance, but the thing about seed starting mix that you guys have to know is that it doesn't have a ton of nutrients in it. So there is a point when your seeds get too big that you need to plant them into the ground or into your pot with regular potting soil so that they have some sort of nutrients to eat off of. Otherwise, if you keep them in this mix, they're going to dry out, they're going to have nothing else to eat, and they're not going to produce anything. So important to know about seed starting mix is it should just be used for seeds and not to continue planting it. And then you're going to want to get your seeds. However you want to get them, you can order them online. We use Johnny Seeds a lot. I brought some seed packets to show you guys different examples today, but Johnny Seeds is a popular one. They have a great selection. I have really great germination rates with Johnny Seeds. Everything I've ordered from them has germinated, which isn't the case with some other places. I also really like Baker Creek. I use Baker Creek or Rare Seeds they go by as well, Baker Creek Rare Seeds. You can get a lot of rare seeds, ironically, through these guys, and they have a ton of varieties. And these are nice because you can order smaller packets like this. You can with Johnny Seeds too, but if you're doing a lot of crop, you can order huge ones from them, where these guys always have just these seed packets. And this is another Baker Creek, just different packaging as well. The only downside of this kind of packaging is it doesn't give you too much information on how to plant. So be careful when you're ordering your seeds. If you want all of the information on seed depth and how far apart to put them, the germination rate, the days till harvest, all of that is usually listed on the Baker ones, but a lot of seeds come without them. We also save our own seeds on the farm. So I have honey nut squash, which is kind of a tiny butternut squash. They're about this big. They're super sweet, hence the honey name. They're delicious. So honey nut squash we saved. I have butternut here. This one I called tie-dye pumpkin. Not sure what it's actually, but it was orange and purple and blue tie-dye looking pumpkin. It was pretty cool, so I saved seeds from that. And this one I labeled huge cool pumpkin. Again, don't know the variety, but it must have been cool enough for me to save seeds. So you'll want to get your seeds, however you get them. Go back here. All right. You'll also want to have something to label with. When I'm using these black containers, I typically will use just a paint marker, and I'll write right on there. The paint marker, you just have to be careful not to get wet, or you'll get lost with it. Otherwise, I'll use anything I have around the house in a permanent marker. I try not to buy anything to label because I can usually find old bags or old sticks, stuff like that to use. It just makes it a little more cost effective than going and buying the plastic things to put in. It's also better for the environment, recycling. And you'll want to make sure that you are able to monitor your seeds and have the correct lighting, which we're going to go over a little bit more in depth. Okay, I have an awesome chart here that I'm not able to show you guys, unfortunately. But if you go to a website called Homesteading and Chill, they have amazing charts on their website for each zone that will tell you when to start specific seeds. It's called Homesteading and Chill. And Chill, yes. And I will post this all up for you guys so you can find it. We can also send out this slideshow for you guys since we're not able to get it up today. So this chart is amazing. It shows you everything that you need to plant in the month to start it. So there's a lot of different seeds that start at different months. For example, these two are pretty different. I don't know if it actually tells me the month in here. Let's see. Yeah, it doesn't tell me here, maybe by the frost date. Yeah, weird. These ones don't tell me. But usually they'll tell you start indoors 2 to 3 weeks before the last frost, or start indoors 6 to 8 weeks before the last frost, or sow directly into the ground, depending on which plant it is. Let me pull this up bigger so I can read some of them off to you guys. All right. So, for example, broccoli and cauliflower need to be started in February, and that's when you want to start the seeds inside. And then you can transplant the seeds in April, and then you can direct sow from April to May, or the month of April, really, is what it's saying. Same with Brussels sprouts there. Eggplant, you can start inside at the end of February and transplant in May. Kale and collards, you can start in the beginning of March and transplant outside in April, or you can start them in the ground April through mid-May, which is right now is prime planting time. Onions, you can start in February and transplant out in April. So a lot of plants in our zone specifically get transferred out in April and May. Also, the seeds typically start at the end of February. So starting seeds in February is really nice if you have the right setup, because you're able to get good-sized plants by the time it's ready for planting. So this guy had a little bit of a tragedy, which is why he looks kind of sad. My toddler knocked him off the kitchen counter this morning. He was so happy, and it was going to be so beautiful for tonight, but unfortunately, he's taken a hit, so we'll probably be harvesting this. But this is something that I started in probably late February, early March, and it's just basil and some thyme, and it came up really nice. The thyme was actually overflowing. I had to separate it a little bit, but this is kind of what your seeds could look like by this point in time. Now, they are still in the seed soil mix. They are past when I should have transplanted them into something more nutritious. So they're probably, if they didn't take a hit, they'd probably still look like this in another couple of weeks anyways. So seeds are really good to start. This I started probably 5 days ago, and it's a giant pumpkin. So it's huge already. It's going to be huge, but you can also start late as well if you need to. This is actually store-bought, which I bought for an example, so I'm not sure when this was planted, but we'll get to that. So yes, going off of a calendar, a seed starting calendar is super helpful for this kind of stuff, especially because you can print it out, you can see it, or you can just save it on your phone or your laptop and refer back to it for each different plant that you want. At this point, you should have your garden planned already, so you should know what you're going to be planting, what you want to grow, and then you can refer to this list to see when to start if you want to go that route. All right. A lot of different seeds prefer to be direct sowed, and some prefer to be started. And there's some that are kind of in the middle. So a lot of direct sow crops are things like beans and beets and broccoli. So beans specifically do not like their roots to be tampered with. Green beans, snap peas, peas in general do not like their roots to be touched. So those you want to direct sow. Usually they don't transplant all that well. We have had some success in the past with them, but we have lost more by transplanting than we have just growing directly in the ground. Also, broccoli is kind of hit or miss. Broccoli, a lot of people start indoors. A lot of people direct sow. Broccoli is another one that doesn't like to have their roots tempered with at all. Brussels sprouts, carrots, and other root vegetables, beets, carrots, they're hard to transplant because they start growing in the ground, obviously, and they root down. Root vegetables, onions also in that. If you do want to start beets and onions and carrots and things like that, I would suggest starting them in something like this. It's just flat. You fill it with soil and sprinkle over the top. It's still going to be really meticulous to remove each little seedling and plant it in the ground, but it's going to be far easier than trying to get them out of cells to do that. They don't transplant well, so I just don't suggest starting them indoors in general. Those are something you're going to want to direct sow. A lot of pumpkins and melons and herbs also don't like to be transplanted. So this pumpkin in particular, I'm breaking the rules because he does not like to be transplanted. But I will probably transplant this tomorrow so that it has the least amount of root disturbance as possible. And it might die, it might live. We'll see what happens. I'll let you know. But herbs also, a lot of things like thyme, basil transplants okay in my experience. But thyme, cilantro, parsley, a lot of those long, small-leafed herbs do not transplant well either, along with dill. Dill doesn't transfer, chamomile doesn't transfer well. So it's good to know which vegetables are good for transferring and which are not. Also, for indoor plants, things that are really good to grow indoors are things like celery, collard greens, cucumbers, eggplant, endive, lettuces. All the lettuces do pretty well transplanting. Peppers, some pumpkins, the little jack-lantern pumpkins, the small ones, transplant really well. Basil, zucchini. So there's a lot of different vegetables. I have this chart here, which you guys can't really see, but I'll have it available to you, which kind of tells you everything. You're going to see vegetables on both sides that kind of mean you can do either way. And you can experiment too, because we've had broccoli that we've started indoors and transplanted that did really well, and then we've had years where we transplant it and it doesn't do well at all, and we have years where we plant it in the ground and it doesn't do well. We're not good with broccoli, apparently, so broccoli's hard. So with seed germination, they need three things. They need water, they need heat, and they need air. So they actually don't need light to germinate, which is why a lot of times, so on our farm when we do carrots, for example, we will seed the entire row in the ground and we'll water it really well, and we actually cover our carrots with just a black plastic. And we'll cover them for 2 or 3 days until we start seeing the roots come up, and that's when we apply the light. And that tends to work really well for us. Our field is really open. We don't have any shade. So the light can dry out the soil, and drying out the soil is actually worse than anything because your seed needs that moisture to grow, which is a lot of times why these seed starter kits come with little greenhouses. If you're doing stuff in these solo cups, you can even get another cup to put on top to lock in that moisture. You just need to be really careful that you're checking them to make sure they're not drying out, that the moisture is collecting in the top of the cup if you were to stack them, because then you'll know that the moisture up here is getting to your seeds. But also once they start to sprout, you're going to want to expose them to that light. So it's just important to keep a close eye. Most seed packets will tell you when the sprout will come in. So for these star cucumbers, it's 7 to 14 days. And for this Rocky Top, it is 7 to 10 days. So it's good to keep track of those as well. Garden journals really help here. I have a whole individual seed starting journal. It kind of gives you a good thing to look back on the next year. If you really liked something, you can see how it did by seed, how it did direct sow. It's good to keep track of all of that. Let's see. Oh, I have some pictures for you guys. All right, let me see. You know what? Let me see if I can actually pull these up. Let's talk about lights in growing. So for growing in grow rooms, that's what we have at our house. A lot of people don't have the room to make a whole entire grow room, but we do have these lights, which I'm just going to come closer to you guys so you can kind of see. Sorry guys, this whole slideshow not working is throwing me off. Okay, so you can kind of see our setup here. Basically what we have is big shelves, and we have big grow lights that we attach to the top of the shelves. And in our grow room, we're able to set up all of our vegetables to grow. And that's a nice part about having the space for that, but even if you're having and we got to keep in mind, we have 6 acres, so we garden probably 1.5 acres this year. So we're doing thousands and thousands and thousands of plants where most people don't need this much. If you're just having a backyard garden, a windowsill will work fine. And you can also just have like one of those wire racks and put a couple lights on them and you'll be fine with that. I don't know if anyone will ever use in a backyard garden 72 cells. Maybe you'll use just one of these, where we have rows and rows and rows and rows of these. So our grow room is a little bit intense for backyard gardening and homesteading, but we've built up to this over the years. So another picture here, if you guys can see, is our lights and how close they are. That's something that you really want to pay attention to. Your lights should not exceed 36 inches from the seed tray. So you don't want your lights any higher than here at the most, I would say, until they start getting too big. By that time, they should be out of here anyways. But if your lights are too far away, you're going to get really leggy plants, which was this picture here, which I know you guys can't really see, and I'm sorry, but if you can see it all, they're very leggy. They're very long, they're very weak, they're flopping over. That's what you want to avoid. And that happens a lot in windowsills as well, is when your seedlings get too long. And you don't want that. You want your seedlings to have true leaves. There are the first leaves that come up on a ceiling. And you want the true leaf to be pretty close to the soil on these seedlings. If you're getting a super long stem and then true leaves, and they're starting to fall over, you're getting leggy plants. Those are not going to do well. They're not going to transfer well. We've done it a lot of times. We used to have our lights up on the ceiling and our seedlings down on the floor, and that's what happened with all of our leggies. We figured out very quickly that that was the improper way to start seeds. And that's when we kind of used the shelves and started redoing all of our seed starting equipment. With the lighting, you can use any LED light. It doesn't have to be a fancy grow light. I think we use the light bulb T8 in our grow room. It's just kind of it gives out 7,000 lumens, I think, and you want 7,000 to 7,500 lumens for your light bulb. That's what we use. It works just fine. You don't have to spend a fortune on the grow lights. The grow lights can really get expensive. So we use just basic LED lights. And once you have your seeds under those lights and they are ready to be transplanted in the garden, you do need to harden off your seeds. This can be tricky, and I don't follow the rules at all on this. So I have a rule sheet for you, but I'll tell you what I do and then you make your best judgment. So here is hardening off tomatoes, and they say to do it 8 days. They say to do it by hours, by day. So for the first day, you leave them outside for 1 hour. You take them out of the lights, you take them out of the house, you put them outside for an hour. The second day, 2 hours. Third day, 3 hours. And then it jumps eventually to day 8, where you keep them outside for 8 hours. I do not do this. I pull all of mine out, I set them on my covered porch, and I leave them out there. So that's what we've done every single year. However, at the time we're hardening off is in that fake springtime that we just finished, where it drops down really low all of a sudden. So you have to, if you're going to leave them off and take that risk and leave them outside, you need to be very careful of the weather, because a lot of times we get a frost without knowing it. And if it drops to 40, I'm pulling them all in, just because I won't take the risk. I've lost them all 1 year and I'll never do it again because of that. We had a freeze that wasn't called for, and all of our not all of them, but a good majority of our transplants were gone because of that freeze. So if you're going to leave them out like I do, just make sure you're very cautious of the weather and the lows at night, and make sure you pull them all in if it's going to be low. And that's the danger of hardening off. But this helps the plant get used to the regular weather outside. It helps it get used to the wind. It helps the stems grow stronger because they're going to be blowing in the wind, and it creates a strong stem for your plants. And hardening off is extremely important. If you were to take your transplants from inside and just directly plant them in the ground, they're going to have a really hard time. They might make it, and you never really know with plants. They kind of have a mind of their own, but the chances are they're not going to make it. They'll have a shock. They're, going into new soil, and the elements of the earth that they're not used to because they've been in a controlled environment for, 4 to 8 weeks, they're going to have no idea what to do, and they're going to go into a huge shock. So that's a good way to lose a lot of your plants, is by just planting them in without hardening them off. This is a photo of, I believe, last year. These are some of our trays of sprouts that we had. So you can see that we do a ton of these 72. I think on this page alone, there's 8. So we do a lot of these seeds every year, and we start majority of our plants from seeds. Sometimes we'll lose stuff that just doesn't make it through the hardening off or didn't stand a chance from the beginning, and we'll go and pick up some substitutes. But for the majority, I would say 95% of everything we grow, we start ourselves. So we do this quite a bit, and that's, I think we're going to jump into the demonstration. So my next ones are kind of on planting. All right, let's do it. Okay, so let me get where I need to be here so that everybody can see. All right, perfect. Yeah, sure. Yeah, is that okay? Yeah. It doesn't matter to me. Yeah, you know what? I have had seeds for 10 years that will sprout, and I've had seeds for 2 years that won't sprout. So it's really hard to tell. They all have dates on them, all the seed packets. So these ones are packed for 2021, and all of my seeds for 2021 are still sprouting. So I think they say generally like 2 years or something is when they expire. But I've had seeds that are decades old and still plant. We found marigold seeds in our barn from the previous owner. So who knows how long they've been there, and they all came up. So, and that was, I've lived there for 10 years, so 10 plus years for those, because we found them like the 4th year or 5th year we lived there. So who knows how long those were in the barn. But yeah, I wouldn't rely on them, but it's fun to like use them up and see if they come up, you know? Yeah, I typically save every year, but not for that reason, just because I usually save plants that we haven't grown before, and or just things that grow out. I save my zinnia seeds every year, but I just planted probably 7 packs of zinnia seeds from 2018, and they're all sprouting. So yeah, it's kind of touchy on that as far as how long to keep them, but I always keep them, and if they don't germinate quickly, then I'll get rid of them. But yeah, it's fun to test them out. So I'm not really sure on that. I think the general consensus is like 2 years. So, but I think it's longer. Okay, so seed starting mix. I brought a little bowl here, and the most important part when starting your seeds, you want to plant in moist soil. You do not want to plant in dry soil. A lot of seeds have a hard outer casing on them. So if you plant them in dry soil, they're going to just have a hard time germinating in general, and it'll just take a little bit longer. But if you plant in moist soil, you're planting the seed into moist soil, and it's just going to speed up your germination. It's also going to help you not make so much of a mess everywhere, because this is super fine. If you see it, it's meant to be super lightweight. You want these to drain well. Good drainage with seed starting is important. And you want to make sure that also at this point, when you have the soil, that you don't have big chunks in it. Seeds have a really hard time with big chunks. You want to make sure that if you're mixing your own potting soil, or even if you get it from the store, sometimes you'll get those big mulch-sized chunks in it, and you want to just make sure that you're clearing those out. I can see a couple in here. The seeds will have a really hard time pushing through that as they germinate. But wet soil is important for planting the seeds. Let's get this mixed up here. I'm trying not to make a mess on this nice table here. Moist. You don't want to pick it up and be able to squeeze it like how it is. It's not fully mixed yet, but you don't want water to come out like that. You want it to be moist where you can't squeeze water out of it. If it's too wet, you can run into mold issues and stuff like that. You just want it to be moist where you can kind of form it into a ball, but see, it's still a little too wet for my liking, to be honest. We're going to add a little bit more in here. So moist soil, and you want to pack these up pretty good as well. When you're packing up your bowls, this is tricky. All right. When you're packing up your little plant or your planters here, you want to make sure that you have a decent good pack on there as well. Your soil can shift, so if you don't pack these up real well, the soil can shift, which will shift the seed down, and then it's going to have a really hard time poking through the surface as well. So you want to pack them down. You don't want it to be rock solid, but you definitely want to make sure that you are getting all of the air pockets out of there. And it takes quite a bit of soil. So we're going to do this big guy. So I'm going to plant some big seeds for you guys today. That's the other thing also. Big seeds like bigger containers. They'll have an easier time. It'll be easier for you because you won't have to transplant them. Like that pumpkin over there that I just planted a couple days ago. Look how big it is already. If you had that in here, you would have to transplant it already. So to make it a little bit easier on you, if you just go ahead and plant them in bigger containers to start off with, it's going to be easier for you in the long run, and it'll give your plant a little more space to grow. So if you are busy and you forget about it for a couple days, it's not a big deal. Or if it's in the small one, the roots are going to grow really fast, and you're going to have trouble with that later, especially since pumpkins typically don't like to be transplanted. All right, so once it's packed in pretty good, you can see that I'm pushing down and the soil isn't moving down any further. You're pretty much ready to go. Figure out the best way to do this here. Okay. Just keep this here. And I'm also going to start this guy too. So you guys, has anyone used these before? No? These things are really nice. So these little pellets are pretty much this soil, and they're just compacted. So the second you add water, they're going to start swelling up. And these are nice because they're built in with, probably should have read the directions on how much water, but it's fine. They'll soak it up. They come already with these little pre-holes in them too. So these are really nice. If you're only doing a few seeds, or you're only doing a few seeds of certain plants, these are nice because they come with that greenhouse cover too. And if you wanted to have the same effect without spending your money on these can be pricey. You can also just use saran wrap and poke little holes in the top. They need the soil, they need the moisture, they need the air, so make sure you poke holes in because you don't want to suffocate the seeds. But you can just wrap saran wrap right over the top of this, and you'll be good to go. So we're going to do a couple, let's see. We'll do some butternut squash. These are kind of a smaller squash seed, which we could probably get away with the smaller cell. But these are pretty small. So you can see here, these are pretty small squash seed compared to pumpkin seeds. Let's do this side by side on my tie-dye pumpkin. Maybe it's better in the soil. Yeah, you guys can kind of see it better. The size difference there, pretty big. So the smaller seeds are going to be just fine in these containers, and I can probably grow them out to full size, to full transplant size in here. And what I'm going to do with these guys, since these are seeds that I saved myself, and I have not tried them yet, I am going to plant a couple in each cell. I do suggest doing 2 or 3 cells or 2 or 3 seeds per cell when you're starting seeds, and thinning out as you go. Thinning out essentially means just pulling out the other ones. You want to always keep the strongest and healthiest looking seedling that comes up. But if all 3 of these come up, then I will just make them smaller. What I do actually also when I'm thinning out my plants, I did with my peppers this year, is I have a bunch of these that I've just never used. And when I was thinning out, I just shoved a bunch of peppers in here, and I ended up getting 8 more peppers just by shoving the seeds that I pulled out when I was thinning into one of these. And we have a ton of peppers. Too many. But you can also just repurpose those. You can replant them if you want. Some of them aren't going to make it. A lot of them will, though. So for this butternut squash, I don't have the instructions on hand, but I do know that these are a 1/2 inch. So you want to make sure that you poke a good size hole in here, about a 1/2 inch. You can use a ruler if you want. They do have planting pokers that you can buy that'll put you up to the 1/2 inch mark on your soil. if you want to use one of those. Once you do it a few times, you kind of get a hang of it, and you can just know how far down it goes. And for these, since they're so big, I am going to do just only 2. So with seeds about this size, you want to do 2. Typically with these pumpkin seeds that are big, you only do 1. But again, with these, I don't know if they're going to come up. So I'll probably do 2 in those as well. But you don't want to put too many seeds in. Otherwise, they're going to be fighting for life also. So you want to make sure you're not overloading it. I'm going to do these guys. These ones I always plant with the point up. I don't know if that makes a difference, but they always come up. So I always do point up on these guys. And you can kind of see, maybe, if I get closer. There we go. You can see the points here. You can still see them. I'm going to lightly cover so that there's not too much soil on top, and I'm not going to pack it down either. So you just want to cover it lightly so that they are all covered without pushing them in any further or packing a ton of soil on top. I really just used the soil that came out when I was putting this marker in to make the hole. There's a little bit of soil that comes around the edges here, and that's what I used to just cover it right back up. Do a couple more littler seeds. All right, this is starting to come up. It actually needs more water, but you guys can kind of see how these are starting to get chunky. They were flat, and I'm glad I didn't overwater. Underwatered. And yeah, this is how this works. You just add water, they poof up. It's really convenient. All right, we're going to do these small little lettuce seeds because these are tiny. And this one has all the instructions for me. So it says it sprouts in 7 to 10 days. This is also where you find all the information, if I didn't tell you that. Back of seed packets. 7 to 10 days, you should get sprouts. The ideal temperature is 50 to 70 degrees. If you are starting them in your house and you're creating a little grow area or a rack of lights, you might want to do a seed heat mat, it's like a heating pad for seeds. Personally, I have never used the heating mats for seeds, but if your house runs cool, they do need that heat as well. They should get some from the light, so you should be okay, but you might want to invest in some of those as well. The seed depth on these is 1/4 inch, so I'm actually going to cover up these holes and make it a little bit smaller. And then when you're planting them outside, you want them 2 to 4 inches apart. They are frost hardy. Lettuce is pretty frost hardy, so you can grow this in cold frames all winter long in this area if you wanted to. And they need 4 to 8 hours of sun. So the seed packets that give you all the instructions are pretty foolproof. It tells you everything you need to have and where to plant them. These seeds are really small. So typically with salad green seeds, I sprinkle these on the soil. You can see how small they are. And I typically just spread these out. I definitely don't start lettuce a whole lot. The seeds are so tiny, it's really hard to get a proper count. And these I'm actually just going to pinch in. So I'm not going to worry about counting these as much because I can separate them later. But just a little pinch and try and feel with my fingers for 2 to 3. And those are the 4th inch. And you put those in pretty easy. Now this is ready to go. This is ready to go underneath a light. It's ready at this point. I will set this outside and it'll be fine. I'll just make sure that it stays wet consistently. You need to make sure that it's always wet. So making a good schedule for yourself is important as well with seed starting. Typically from my day, I wake up, I pour a cup of coffee, and I go down into the grow room and I'm watering for the next 30 minutes, making sure that nothing dries out. It's really important that they don't dry out. So heat, air circulation. If you're doing the racks with lights again, clip-on fans are really nice. They sell them in the baby section of Target, and they're used for strollers and things like that. But you can clip them on to the wire, and they'll blow air through. Circulation is good. The lights will provide the warmth most of the time, and you just want to make sure they don't dry out. With watering, you do not want to water this. Am I in the way? Yes. You do not want to water this over top. So this is a giant jug of water. We have well water, so you can probably tell it's not the prettiest. But watering over top is just going to shift your seeds all over the place. So when watering over top for the first few days until the sprouts emerge, you'll want to use a spray bottle. Spraying is the best way to do it before the seeds come up. So to keep the soil moist, you just spray. And even if your soil is moist when planting, you want to water it again right after you plant. Once the seeds come up and they look like this or this, you're going to want to bottom water. Watering from the top with seeds like this, you're going to create a recipe for fungus, for disease. So once your seedlings come up, even if it's just one little sprout, you want to start bottom watering. These are nice for bottom watering, these big cells, if you're going to use something like this. Now, they do come in smaller as well, which might work perfectly depending on how much you're trying to plant. But you just put water down here in this tray. You can water it all the way through. You don't want it sitting in water, so start light and give it a couple minutes, see how it soaks it up, add more if needed. And these are nice for that because they can just sit right in the bottom there. I do use these at home regardless. You can use anything that has a little bowl like this. So you could even take each thing and stick it in a bowl like this to bottom water, or you could use the top of a Rubbermaid container, you could use a Tupperware, you could find something to bottom water in. But I'll actually use these for stuff like this that's free as well, and just line them all up and water the bottom of the tray. And then I leave it for a little bit and come back. If they're standing water, I take them out. Bottom watering is super important for seedlings. It's a thing that most people ignore and don't do, but a lot of times the plants will come out looking like this, and they'll come out looking like this if they're bottom watered. This is apple mint, actually. It's a new variety of mint that I'm trying this year. I've never heard of apple mint before, so I wanted to get one of these guys. And Thieves Farm and Market, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Thieves. They are out west as well. I think maybe Maple Park, maybe. But they are an amazing local greenhouse. They grow thousands and thousands of varieties of vegetables. Awesome people as well. This is from them, and they bottom water all of their plants as well. It's really important. You don't want your plants to get disease, especially this early in the game. So another thing with mint, if you weren't here for the first one, do not plant mint in the ground. Do not do it. I have about a half acre of mint, and I think by the end of this year, I'll have a full acre of mint. And that was my biggest mistake in gardening to this day, was planting mint in the ground. So, okay. So these guys are kind of ready to go here, I think. Yeah. So once you add water to these, they should be able to be squished quite a bit. You can feel the soil moving around. That's how you know that they are moist enough to start planting. Yeah, these guys are good to go. And I do like to go through with these packets and get them all loosened up a little bit, because they're in those tiny little discs and the soil is so compacted. But you can see that they have, maybe you can't really see, they have a little hole right here that's already pre-dug for you. So these are really nice for people with home gardens or someone that needs to do something fast and you just want to get stuff in the ground. Yes, so this has the greenhouse cover. Some of them do. It's like a little mossy cover, yeah, to hold the dirt in. But they have these holes in the top that are just ready to go for planting. And this will go, you can plant this whole pod when you're transplanting as well. So these are really nice. If you have just a small garden you want to do, or even just start a couple different seeds of something to play with, these are really nice for that. You know, I have these are called seed starting greenhouse kits. So these are just little peat pellets, and it gives you all the directions on the back as well. And it's nice because they come with the little greenhouse cover, so it's got you all ready to go to start your seeds. And they need to be broken in a little more. My station here is a mess. All right. And for here, I think we'll try this tie-dye pumpkin. I brought big seeds so that you guys could see them, because once you start getting with the little seeds, it's really hard to see. All right, let's see here. So these are nice because they already have the hole that you can just put them right in. Pumpkin seeds, maybe not the best for these. I need a little more dirt, I think. But I don't want to start too many of these butternut squashes. Oh yeah, they're going in there. So these are super convenient because you really don't even have to do much else. You'll want to cover them just slightly. Yeah, this one's a little too big. We'll move on to a different one. But these are super convenient. So once you have all of these planted, all you have to do is cover them up, set in a window, and you're good to go. These are really convenient for home gardeners. And I think I started my first garden with these. They also come in bigger sizes like this that you can use with the greenhouses Home Depot are really popular at. But these are really nice for beginner gardeners. You don't have to worry about creating your own soil mix. You don't have to worry about having leftover seeds if you're low on space at home. It gives you a lot of opportunity to start a lot of things without a lot of time and maybe a little extra money. Yes, I use milk jugs on things that are really hard to start because they are like a perfect replica of a greenhouse. It's a great question. Greenhouses can be made out of milk jugs. You don't have to spend any money. You can do the same thing, just drill holes in the bottom of it, cut it in half where it's still attached a little bit. You can even remove it all the way and just duct tape it back together and cut it in half. Leave this top open, fill the bottom with soil so that when you cut it in half, it's so you can plant and fill with soil. And then plant your seeds in there, put the top back on, tape it around, and leave this part open. And they work, jugs work really well as greenhouses. I have a really hard time with lavender. I don't know if anyone here has tried to plant lavender. It's really finicky. And I've had great success with lavender and calendula, or not calendula, ranunculus. A flower is hard to start, and I've started those successfully in milk jugs. So, yes. Yeah, you don't want to use potting soil to start seeds because it's too nutrient dense. So it's actually the chemical reactions that happen within the soil with the germination of the seed can kill the germination because it's too chemically. It's got too much nutrients in it. You want something with almost no nutrients. Seeds don't need nutrients to grow. So once they become plants, like this would be a good time. This needs to be replanted because this is a seed mix, into regular soil. You can start seeds in potting soil, however, I don't recommend it. But yeah, and then back onto the planting. Once you're ready to go, the planting part is pretty easy. We talked about the hardening off. You just want to make sure that your soil is prepped. If you missed our last class, you can go watch that on YouTube and see how to prep your soil for planting. So you want to make sure it's prepped and ready to go. You want to make sure that your seeds are spread out far enough in your beds. So, for example, this lettuce says 2 to 4 inches apart. I think cucumbers are a bit more. Cucumbers are 18 to 36 inches apart. So when you're planting, you want to make sure that you are spacing correctly with that. You want to make sure that the root ball is level with the soil. And this is a thing that a lot of people mistake, is digging too deep of holes. So for example, that's also how you take it out if you don't know. You just squish it a little bit. A lot of people, this is pretty root bound at this point, which just means it has a pretty solid root base here. It's a little past when I should have transplanted it, but I wanted it for today. So you can loosen this a little bit, but you also don't have to. You can leave it just like this and it's going to be just fine. You want to make sure that the top of the soil here is level with the hole that you've dug. So this is a unique plant here because it is square. So you'll want to make sure, get here, use this as an example. So if this was the dirt that you're digging, you want it to be level with the dirt in the rest of your garden. So make sure that you're not digging too deep. That's when you get prone to disease, because these bottom leaves here are going to be deep into the soil, they're going to be collecting water underneath that soil, and it's just a recipe for disease. So you do want it to be level with the ground. So same with this guy here, which he's really not going to like this. But it's going to be all right. This guy here is a little bit different because he's not compacted. So this is what most of our little seedlings look like. You can see the roots there. This is how far I would put it in. Don't worry about the roots dangling. A lot of people think that you need to dig deep enough for the roots to set in comfortably. Just squish them in. They'll be fine. They're going to reach down into the soil anyways. So you'll want this guy, this root ball here, to be the top, aligned with the soil. Digging too deep is going to be a problem with disease mostly. All right. Then when you're packing back in, should have just used this as an example ahead of time. When you're packing, when you transplant and you put it back in, like I did this very poorly, so this is great. Get some more soil in here. You're going to want to pack around the seedling lightly. So dig a little hole, put it in, make sure it's level, and then just pack in lightly. A lot of people also shove down really hard on here, but you do want to give it a little bit of room to get stable itself and let it kind of wiggle its way with the roots. You don't want to pack it too hard, otherwise it's going to have a hard time getting those roots to spread. Right after you plant, no matter what you're planting, you want to water immediately. Water is going to also help get those roots down. It's going to help it reach down. It's going to give it a source of water right away, obviously, and it's going to settle your plant into the soil. So watering immediately is really important, especially with transplants. And you're going to want to cover with shade if needed. We hardly ever cover with shade unless we're doing something that's really temperamental in our field, like broccoli or cauliflower. Those are typically the only things that will shade. If it's hot, like today, you know how it is here in the Midwest. It's like spring, cold, and then just beaming hot. So we have our cauliflower and stuff like that covered. But other than that, you don't have to worry about covering too much in this area. And for your upkeep of the seeds in the gardens, you're just going to want to make sure that you're watering daily. So that goes back to planting your garden, making sure that you have enough time to water every single day, especially with transplants until they're more mature, like this guy here. They need water a lot. You want to make sure that you're staking vegetables that need to be staked as they go. Tomatoes, cucumbers, peas, beans, things like that. You're going to want to make sure that you're staking as they grow. Weeding, obviously, the bane of everyone's existence. Is the worst job in my life, personally. I hate weeding, but it has to be done. So weeding, yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Yeah, good drainage is important. And with our last class, you could test the soil, see how the moisture level is just by sticking your hand in the soil. And if soil comes up out of it, it's going to be pretty wet. So you can see here, that's pretty wet soil. So if it's pretty wet, this I wouldn't water right now. But if you come up and you're bone dry, it needs water, I would, even if it's pretty dry, I would water it. You'll know when there's too much water. So just make sure you don't overwater. It's hard to find that balance, but it comes with practice. So yes, you definitely want good drainage, and at least check every day if you're not watering every day for water. And then adding nutrients back into the soil as your plants grow. If you choose to go that route with some sort of fertilizer, you'll want to add that as your growing season goes on, just so that your plants stay healthy and are getting the nutrients they need. Sometimes plants can suck up all the nutrients pretty quickly. You want to apply some sort of compost or an additive nutrient, if you'd like, to your soil. And then just keeping notes in your garden journal for the next years. Those are garden journals have saved me hundreds of times on mistakes of replanting or planting something that doesn't like the spot that we planted in. So garden journals I highly recommend. It took me a very long time to get into garden journaling. And then once I finally did it, and mine's so messy, I just write down notes while I'm out there. It lives outside, so it's all rain damage, it's a mess. But it works, and it helps you kind of keep track of what worked and what didn't. So just keeping track of that and making sure everything's watered. And that's seed starting, the basics. Yes, questions?
All right, yeah, so we are going to move into our question and answer portion of the evening. For anyone who is here in this room, if you could please raise your hand. Galen is going to come around with the microphone, and that is so all of our friends here on Zoom can hear your question, and then we'll kind of bounce back and forth. So if anyone who is listening on Zoom has a question, please head on down to the Q&A box and type your question in there, and we will get to as many as we can this evening. And Galen has one first.
Hi. What would you recommend is like the 3 easiest for like novice gardeners that don't have a green
like vegetables to start?
Yeah.
Oh man. Let's see. The 3 easiest, I would say probably tomatoes. Are you talking seed starting or just in general? Or both? General. Tomatoes for sure. Tomatoes they can be temperamental, but as long as they're staying watered and you're bottom watering and not watering from the top where they don't get disease, tomatoes are pretty easy. Cucumbers are pretty easy and they're pretty hardy. And lettuce. Lettuce is pretty foolproof. You can just sprinkle seeds on top of a pot and have lettuce all summer long. It's also cold weather tolerant, so you don't have to worry about it as much. However, it will get bitter in the heat. So if you can put it in a shadier location, it'll be better than direct sun all day long. But those are probably the easiest in my experience to grow. And then squash, zucchini is fairly easy as well.
All right, we have a question from Zoom. Have the zones changed as we live with a warmer climate? How long will we be in zone 5B? Will we be moving into different zones over time?
That is a very interesting question and a very good question, and I don't have the answer for that. However, as of now, we have not changed zones, but we have collectively, as farmers in the industry, noticed the same thing, and I would say probably eventually will shift, as our summers in this area are tending to get longer, actually, and it's definitely shifting, but I haven't heard anything about it changing as of recent.
I noticed that you said that some plants lend themselves better to direct sow and some of them don't want to be transplanted. And yet everything that you see at the nursery to buy plants, you have to transplant them if you're buying plants.
Right.
And so are there certain vegetables that you should stay away from that you see the plants already at the nursery because they won't want to be transplanted?
That is a great question as well. And a little bit of a difficult one. The nurseries that you see at the garden centers are giant corporation nurseries, and the techniques that they're using to grow their seeds we're not always aware of. So they may be using something like for broccoli, for example, tends to like to be direct sowed. They don't like their roots handled. However, broccoli plants are abundant at these stores. And I'm not sure what growing techniques they use, but I have known that people do pretty well with transplants of broccoli. So my assumption is however they're growing those seeds, whatever they're doing to make them hardier is what they're doing. I don't know if they're using some sort of fertilizers or enhancements or what may be. I have no idea. But I would say that they're probably pretty safe from there. From my experience, starting broccoli at home has had a terrible time transplanting. So I'm not sure what they're doing, but it seems that it works for most people. So I would say go for it. I have yet to try broccoli from a store, but I need to.
By any chance, do you know anything about local seed trading?
I know a little bit.
Yeah. So Cantini hosted an event this year that we called Seedy Saturday. So we hosted it in early spring, and I believe I'll have to Google it when I get back to my seat, but I think it's Batavia or Bartlett. One of the
Batavia.
Yes. So there's libraries that have seed swaps as well. And I think Cantini will plan on doing another seed swap in early spring next year as well.
Yes. Yeah. A lot of libraries are getting into that. Sorry? Oh. Yeah, you pretty much bring any of your extra seeds to like Batavia Library, for example, has started one. and you bring all your extra seeds, and it's essentially a seed bank. So they hold on to all those seeds, and you kind of take what you need and leave what you don't. So it's a great way to trade seeds. It's a great way to try new things. It's a great way, a budget-friendly way to start gardening as well, because you have those free seed options. And yeah, it's wonderful. I actually have a ton that I need to go drop off over there because I'm overflowing.
Do you have any questions, Jackie, or can we keep in this room? Okay.
I just wanted to ask, so I used to do some seeds years ago, but recently it seems like in the spring, time just gets away from me, and all of a sudden it's like end of April. I'm like, I didn't start anything.
Yeah.
So I go to like, Costco or wherever, and I get my tomato plants. Is there like other than, I only do like 4 or 5 tomato plants and then some other things. Is there, other than volume and cost, is there a benefit? Do you think, what is the benefit of actually starting the seeds in like my situation with a small garden?
I think it's totally personal preference, to be honest. With starting your own seeds, you get to pick your own varieties. So if there's a certain variety of tomato that they don't offer at the big box stores or even at small farm markets that you want to try, we grow a tomato that is blue and tie-dye. It's called Brad's Atomic. You can only get those seeds from Baker Creek. So stuff like that, I think, is the only benefit, really. Otherwise, the plants that you're getting from these stores are pretty healthy and ready to be transplanted. So I think it's really just personal preference and trying those varieties that you can't really find anywhere else. So if you're short on time, that's what I would do too. Is transplant. Yeah.
Can I quick piggyback that one? So my TikTok has turned over to all garden TikTok. And one thing that they're doing is they're saying, people be like, the best way to get tomatoes fresh, fast is get the plant from Home Depot or wherever you will. And then they say to bury it super duper deep and just the top sprig coming out. And so it's pretty much the opposite of what you've instructed here. Have you planted tomatoes that way? Do you have recommendations there, or?
Yes. So with tomatoes is probably the exception to the rule here, actually. I'm glad you brought this up. Tomatoes, we dig deep, but I don't dig them that deep. I don't bury all the way to where just the top sprig is out. However, I wish I had a tomato plant to show you. I'm going to use this as an example. It's not tomato, but so the stem of a tomato, your leaves are generally up here, up top. The stem has some little fuzzies down here. They're white, and those are all the roots down here. And then they have another set of fuzzies. That's obviously not the right word, but they're like little hairs. There's a better word. They have hairs on the bottom that are like little nodes, and you can see that they're little root nodes. Right above that, they have some more hairs, and those are actually defense mechanism hairs there to keep the bugs off of the stem. So you want to plant your tomato plant. If this is the pot and this is your tomato, you can plant it all the way up to here where you have only this much stem coming out. And that builds a stronger root system for the plant. Typically, it'll give you more fruit as well, but planting it just soil level will be fine as well. However, I've never seen it. I'm going to have to look at those TikToks. I've never seen it planting that deep, but I would be interested to see that because I feel like it'd probably work.
I have another tomato question.
Yes.
We bought a few tomato plants from a greenhouse.
Okay.
And we have them in a big pot on our deck.
Okay.
They're about 2 feet tall, but they have no yellow flowers on them. I was wondering, is there something wrong with them? Or?
How many do you have in your pot?
There's 3. The pot's about 14 inches.
Okay.
And we have 3.
3? Okay. They're going to need more room.
Okay.
So I would do, and they're 2 feet, about this big?
Oh, maybe bigger than that.
Maybe a little bigger?
Yeah. It may,
okay.
Yeah.
I would separate all of them.
Okay.
So 1 per pot.
Okay.
They need a lot of room. They're going to bush out a lot. And I wouldn't worry about the yellow flowers yet. None of mine are flowering yet. So it's a little bit early in the season. But those will be overcrowded. And it's not a huge deal. You could keep them in there, but it is going to result in less fruit.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Thank
if you
you.
want more fruit, I would replant those a little bit.
2 tomato things.
Okay.
One thing that you just mentioned about the depth, but what is the ideal depth to plant? I know with the square foot gardening, they're saying 6 inches is enough. Is that enough for a tomato plant?
Yeah, and it depends too on the size of the plant. So with the depth, I should have brought a tomato. I don't know why I didn't bring a tomato plant seed packet. Seed starting, I think tomatoes are a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch to start. But then if you have something like this, we grow our tomatoes in solo cups typically. Actually, my mom gave me all of these, so she started them in here. These were Romas. And at this point, with these guys, I dug, probably 6 inches, probably 2 inches further than this, and put it in. With these ones, I'll dig the length of the solo cup and put it in. So it really depends on the size of your transplant, too. So when I'm ready to transplant these, they're about this big. So it's a pretty big plant. So I would go off of the size of your plant. Just make sure that you're digging a hole that's big enough to at least fit the pot that it's in. And then you can add a couple inches if you want. You're not going to hurt it by planting tomatoes deeper because they have those root nodes that go up the stem. So either way, they're going to stem out.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, where we shop and get tomato plants, it's at a nursery, but it's not heated.
Okay.
It's just, kind of like a greenhouse type thing.
Yeah.
Do you still have to do the hardening when you buy those there?
No.
Can you buy them that day and plant them the next day and they're fine?
Yes. I would suggest maybe leaving them out for a couple hours, but a greenhouse mimics, especially at this point at nurseries, when they're starting the seeds, they create a certain environment. The beauty of greenhouses is that you can adjust the environment. So by the time that they're selling them to the public, they probably have the walls up and the doors open, so they're already being exposed to the elements. So I don't think you need to worry too much at that point if you're getting them from a nursery.
Okay, my last thing is just about compost. Reading a lot about, if you're not composting, that's horrible, and everybody should be composting. And if you buy compost in a bag at the store, it's only based off of one thing, but you want a whole bunch of different things. Could you say some things about composting and the necessity of doing it yourself?
Yes. So truthfully, we have only been composting 2 years max. So composting was such a drag for me until I actually got into it, and then I was like, okay, this is fun. But I had the same attitude where I was like, I don't want to do this. Like, it's just a lot of work. And it is a lot of work. But I would say compost, they have a point a little bit. When you're going into compost, they have a ton of stuff. They've got like Black Cow, which is just cow manure compost. They have mushroom compost at big box stores and other nurseries. But then they also have a really good blend of organic compost. So really what you want to do is just figure out what compost is going to work best for you and what you're looking for to enhance your soil, and read the packaging on that compost. I wouldn't be too worried about composting, especially if you don't have a lot of land. They don't smell. Compost pits should not smell, but they do take up a lot of space, and you do have to turn them. So in a backyard garden, I wouldn't worry about it too much personally, but I just started liking compost, so that's very normal, so don't worry. And yeah, we've got one big mound, giant mound. It's not cute. So, yeah, it's not pretty at all.
You had mentioned that some of the seeds, like the tie-dye pumpkin, that you harvest yourself. What is the process for harvesting your own seeds?
Yeah, so it's different per plant. Pumpkins are actually a great example because they're pretty easy. So with like when you're going to carve a pumpkin and you're scraping out the guts, you just want to take them and put it in a strainer and clean off all the seeds. What I do then is I have those big cookie sheets, and I'll put parchment paper down, and then I put paper towels down. A lot of layers. So a thick layer of paper towel because I want it to dry out. So I'll take the seeds that are all clean. I'll dry them first in paper towels, or a salad spinner works really well to get the extra moisture off, and then lay them out on the cookie sheet with the paper towels on there and just let them dry. I just let them air dry. Now these I dried last year, the huge cool pumpkin and the tie-dye pumpkin. I wish I knew the names of them, but I don't. And I haven't tried them yet, so I just planted some, so we'll see if they work. But most of my seeds work, and that's how I harvest all of them. So cucumbers the same way. Cucumbers a little harder because there's small seeds, but just lay them out to dry. I tend to forget about them, so I would say probably takes like 2 weeks. You can really tell. Also, if anyone wants a seed or two of these, please have at it. You can tell because they're dry. Like you can hear how dry they are. So you'll know when they're dried all the way through is when they're ready. Yeah. When they're... No, it's just my dining room. It turns into my seed drying room. Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much,
Yes, thank you,
Jillae, for
everyone.
being here today. Thank you, everyone, both on Zoom and here in person. And if you are a planner like I am, save the date. Jillae will be back with us on Tuesday, September 19th, here in this room at 7 p.m. And we'll be talking about fall gardening and prepping our gardens for the winter time. So I know it's hard to think about that, especially since it's just finally starting to warm up around here. But we hope to see you all again come this September, and we hope to see you around Cantini this summer.
Thank you, guys. Yes. Yes.